The Zaibatsu in Japan played a significant role in running the nation's economy. Over several decades leading into the early 1900s, the families who owned these colossal businesses amassed immense wealth, creating substantial income inequality within the country. However, this wealth and inequality drastically changed in a short period. These powerful families lost control of their businesses. Today, we'll dive into how Japan's wealthiest families acquired their wealth, how the authorities targeted and absorbed their fortunes, and the implications for the Japanese economy post-World War II. The story begins with Matthew Perry and the arrival of the black ships in the 1850s, which forced Japan to open up to the world. This event marked the end of centuries of isolation, revealed a significant industrial gap between East and West, and humiliated Japan. To bridge this gap and modernize the military, the ruling Tokugawa military government incurred enormous expenses, depleting the treasury. In response, the shoguns devalued the currency and increased taxes, leading to public discontent, especially among the merchants. A group of samurai, fearing that Japan would suffer the same fate as China at the time, removed the shoguns from power, leading to the Meiji Restoration. The leaders of the Meiji Restoration realized that the old system of hereditary castes was incompatible with modernization. Consequently, they implemented extensive changes in Japan's political, social, and economic structure. Under the previous rule of the shoguns, the hereditary samurai class governed as local lords over fiefdoms, receiving fixed stipends and various societal privileges, straining government budgets. The Meiji leaders abolished these privileges and transformed rice stipends into government bonds. While some of the samurai class attempted a brief rebellion, many of them, being well-educated, adapted to the new society, serving as professional business managers in this new era. The Meiji government aimed to boost production and industry to fend off Western colonization. The rapid industrialization of Japan required the development of complete supply chains. To create weapons, they needed iron, which led to the construction of iron foundries, railways, and more. The Japanese government established various state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, to drive this industrialization. These SOEs operated in industries like railways, breweries, cement, textiles, shipbuilding, and weapons production. The primary goal was to bolster industrial capacity and reduce reliance on imported goods. Initially, these SOEs were not expected to turn a profit, and their losses had to be covered by the government. To finance these losses, the Japanese government nationalized the country's mines, declaring all underground minerals state property. However, by the late 1870s, the losses incurred by SOEs began to threaten the government's financial stability. In the early 1880s, an attempt to privatize these state-owned enterprises failed when they were offered for sale at book value, but there were no buyers. Another round of privatization in 1884 included some of the profitable SOEs, including mines, shipbuilding, ironworks, cement manufacturing, and textiles. The mining sector held significant potential, as it had been exploited for centuries but had seen diminished output due to various factors. Foreign experts introduced modern technologies such as steam-powered pumps, explosives, and vertical shafts to revitalize mining operations. Out of the 21 major privatization sales, 11 were related to mining, with the crown jewel being the Nikkei coal mine. This influx of foreign technology unlocked hidden value in these industries, but also involved a substantial transfer of public assets into private hands, akin to the emergence of Russian oligarchs in the 1990s. The merchant families who acquired these assets and benefited from them would go on to create the Zaibatsu, which can be understood as financial clans in Chinese characters. These business entities and their Korean counterparts called chaebols played a pivotal role in Japan's economic landscape. Before the Meiji Restoration, merchant trading houses existed, but they were different from Western-style businesses and held lower social status. The changes brought about by the Meiji era presented unique opportunities for families with the right connections and determination. These Zaibatsu families included top-tier ones like Mitsubishi and Sumitomo, as well as second-tier ones like Nissan, Furukawa, and Kawasaki, established holding companies controlled by extended families. These holding companies, in turn, oversaw numerous subsidiary businesses run by professional managers. Zaibatsu assets were considered communal property and couldn't be utilized arbitrarily by individual family members. The pathways to wealth and power for these families were relatively similar. They acquired exclusive rights to or directly purchased abundant natural resources and used the revenue from these ventures to finance their expansion into various sectors of the Japanese economy. For example, the Mitsui family, which had substantial wealth by the 1840s, switched allegiance from the shogunate to the Meiji government in 1867. They helped fund the government's armies, engaged in currency reform, and secured lucrative concessions for government financial services. The Mitsui family's financial resources allowed them to acquire numerous mines, including the Miike coal mine, which became the foundation of their substantial wealth. They established various businesses such as Mitsui Bank, Mitsui Mining, and Mitsui Busan, a general trading company, to manage their wealth. As the Mitsui family's wealth grew, they continued to expand into various sectors, including textiles, chemicals, and shipbuilding. Their success allowed them to create a self-contained economic ecosystem. Other Zaibatsu families followed a similar trajectory, dominating the domestic economy, similar to how Samsung operates today. In the 1920s, as natural resource income began to decline, Zaibatsu families turned to the stock market as a new source of capital for their expansion plans. The rapid accumulation of wealth by Zaibatsu families came at the expense of the general population and contributed to growing income inequality. These families began selling minority stakes in their subsidiaries to the public, allowing shareholders to have ownership but not enough influence to make significant decisions. The controlling families always retained the largest blocks of shares. These moves generated substantial capital for the Zaibatsu families, which they used to acquire more revenue-generating assets like farmland and residential complexes. Rents from these land assets, combined with high-yielding financial assets, generated substantial passive income that enriched the wealthy while imposing economic burdens on the less privileged. During this period, the wealth of the top 1% grew 3.5 times faster than the national average, creating a significant wealth gap. The government tolerated this inequality because it served the overarching ideological goals of the time. The Zaibatsu played a crucial role in Japan's industrial and later militaristic expansion. During the early 20th century, Japan pursued aggressive expansionism through the colonization of territories like Korea, the creation of the puppet state of the Manchukuo, the invasion of China, and other militaristic ventures. The Zaibatsu provided resources and raw materials for these military campaigns, receiving substantial government contracts in return. However, by the 1930s, a military government came to power in Japan, and they criticized the Zaibatsu for their short-term focus on profits. The government passed laws that allowed it to exert control over the Zaibatsu's investment decisions, effectively diminishing their autonomy. These measures culminated in the loss of control over their companies on the eve of Japan's entry into World War II. Starting the Second Sino-Japanese War and aggressively pursuing World War II brought immense hardship and suffering to Japan. To maintain social stability and their grip on power, the Japanese government passed significant and radical reforms. These reforms substantially reduced the wealth of Zaibatsu families, as war damage crippled the most productive assets of their companies, and the government began regulating rents, wages, and land prices. Additionally, in 1938, the government confiscated and redistributed agricultural lands from landlords to tenant farmers to boost food production for the war effort. These land reform policies continued after the war under occupation authorities. After World War II, the Japanese government imposed an 85% tax on the capital of the Zaibatsu family's taxable assets. Many Zaibatsu family members faced significant losses, up to 90% of their wealth. In 1946, the Holding Company Liquidation Commission, or HCLC, ordered the dissolution of the Zaibatsu. The commission targeted 10 major Zaibatsu families, including Mitsui and Mitsubishi. In a series of actions, the HCLC confiscated stocks and bonds belonging to the Zaibatsu holding companies, required family executives to give up their positions in their companies, and removed nearly 2,000 executives from hundreds of businesses. However, the initial lists of purged executives were hastily drawn, leading to a second round of purges ordered in 1948. In this phase, 56 family heads and 309 of their relatives were removed from their company positions. An additional 2,798 high-ranking company executives were also required to resign from their roles. The HCLC acquired the personally held stocks and bonds of these individuals, estimated to be worth another 1.2 billion yen in 1948. Half of this amount was paid to the government as part of the tax on capital, while the rest went to the HCLC for future resale, with compensation provided to those affected. The American public, influenced by experiences in Germany and China, believed that the Zaibatsu families held some responsibility for and had profited from Japanese aggression, leading to the government's actions against them. The goal of the HCLC wasn't punitive, but rather aimed at dissolving the powerful octopus of monopolistic financial, industrial, and commercial combines in Japan. While the families may have borne some responsibility for wartime atrocities, it was challenging to establish a clear paper trail, and they largely escaped more severe punishment. The HCLC and occupation treated them relatively fairly, and it was not a communist-style takeover. The families did receive cash compensation for the financial assets that HCLC acquired. For example, the Mitsui families received 1.2 billion yen for all their shares. However, the proceeds were deposited into a national bank with limited withdrawals to prevent the reacquisition of controlling stakes in the future. As a side effect, this action led to the democratization of Japanese stocks. In 1946, 1 out of every 4 stocks had been owned by the Zaibatsu, but by 1950, this share decreased to 1 out of 20. The wealthiest Japanese families saw their wealth and income substantially reduced over time. Land reform during and after the war had diminished their rental income, the post-war capital tax took a significant portion of their taxable family assets, and the forced sale of some art to museums further reduced their wealth. Hyperinflation in the post-war years, coupled with limited access to the proceeds from the sale of assets until 1951, led to a dramatic decrease in the real value of their cash holdings. By 1950, the top 1% of the highest-earning Japanese individuals were earning half of their income from employment, signaling a significant shift in their financial circumstances. While the occupation forced the family members and associates out of their companies, it didn't lead to the total dismemberment of the companies themselves. The Ministry of International Trade and Industry, or MITI, gained de facto policy and guidance control over Japan's corporate apparatus, with the families no longer dominating the domestic market. This shift allowed MITI to guide Japan toward a pro-export industrialist path. Rather than focusing on dominating the domestic market and suppressing competition, Japanese companies shifted their focus outward and adopted an export-oriented strategy. This new approach led to the acquisition and mastery of foreign technology, using it to create products for global markets. Japan's export discipline became the cornerstone of its economic miracle in the 1950s and 1960s, and it transformed Japan into a major global economic player. The reset and restructuring following World War II played a pivotal role in these developments and ultimately reshaped Japan's economic landscape.